Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is out in cinemas now. Is it a good conclusion to James Gunn's trilogy? And does Guardians 3 do enough to rescue the MCU from its current state of decline? Full spoilers ahead, so if you want to go into the movie blind, then perhaps come back later. With that out of the way, here's a quick plot summary and my thoughts on the film at the end. In answer to the first question, yes, Volume 3 concludes the Guardians trilogy well. Not perfectly, but it is a good film. I would say it's better than Guardians 2, but not as good as the original Guardians of the Galaxy. And does it do enough to rescue the MCU from its decline? I'd say no. I don't think it will make enough money to make a big impact on the state of the MCU. In the next few weeks, I imagine videos and articles will say that Guardians 3 didn't do enough at the box office to turn things around. Guardians 2 made $869 million and the original made $770 million in ticket sales. I imagine Guardians 3 will make much less than both, partly due to its somber tone that makes the movie less of a family-friendly one. This dark tone is present from the very start, as on the planet Nowhere, we are introduced to the Guardians. We follow Rocket and then see a drunk Quill passed out as he is carried to his bedroom by Nebula. Then Adam Warlock attacks Rocket and injures him severely. They need to operate on Rocket to fix his injuries, but Rocket has a kill switch built into his body by the High Evolutionary if anyone tries to open him up. In order to save Rocket, they head to Orgosphere, the giant fleshy headquarters where all of the High Evolutionary's data on creations he made is stored. They are joined by 2014 Gamora, who leads the Ravagers, who doesn't remember the last 5 years with Quill and the Guardians, as she was brought back by Hulk Snap in Infinity War. And Gamora and the Guardians infiltrate the base. They get Rocket's data file and escape. The Guardians learn about the horrors that Rocket faced during his time being tested on by the High Evolutionary, and we learn of these events via pretty dark but touching flashbacks. The data file is missing the deactivation code on Rocket's kill switch, so they head to Counter-Earth, where the High Evolutionary's evolved creatures live. Gamora defends Rocket on a Guardian ship from Adam Warlock and a warrior robot Pigman. Meanwhile, Quill and Groot capture the High Evolutionary scientist and retrieve his memory, which includes Rocket's kill switch deactivation code. Nebula, Mantis and Drax board the High Evolutionary ship, believing that Quill and Groot still need rescuing. Quill and Groot are in fact with Gamora on their ship, and with the kill switch code, they revive Rocket. Rocket has a vision of his test subject friends, Lila, Teefs and Floor. In a flashback, we find out that when Rocket tried to help them escape their cages, they were shot by the High Evolutionary and his minions. This led to Rocket attacking the High Evolutionary and escaping him before the events of Guardians 1, all those years ago. Mantis, Nebula and Drax, who are still on the High Evolutionary ship, come across hordes of captured children, and are captured themselves and placed in a chamber with obelisks, the same creature they fought in the opening of Guardians 2. Mantis is able to persuade the obelisk to side with them, and they are reunited with the Guardians. A cool long-shot corridor fight scene entails on a High Evolutionary ship, and with the help of Kraglin and his telepathic dog Cosmo, they bring the captured children to Nowhere. Rocket leaves the rest of the Guardians, who are busy helping free the children. Rocket is then attacked by the High Evolutionary, but Quill, Nebula and co. save Rocket, and Gamora unmasks the High Evolutionary. He is revealed to have been seriously scarred by Rocket's attack, many years ago, and they leave him to die as his ship blows up. When leaving the ship, Quill drops his mixtape and goes back to get it, but is left floating in space, seemingly dying in the same way Yondu did in Guardians 2. That is until Adam Warlock saves him. The last 20 minutes of the film closes off the Guardians, with Mantis leaving to find her own path, much to the dismay of Drax, Quill giving the captaincy of the Guardians to Rocket, and leaving to Earth to reunite with his grandfather, and Gamora returning to lead her Ravagers. In a mid-credit scene, we are shown a new Guardians team, which consists of Rocket, Groot, who is now massive, Cosmo, Kraglin, Adam Warlock, and Phyla-Vell, one of the rescued children from the High Evolutionary ship. The post-credit scene shows Quill with his grandfather, finally at peace, to restart his life on Earth, and text fills the screen, saying, "The legendary Star-Lord will return," hinting that Chris Pratt will return to the MCU at some stage in the future. Overall, I enjoyed the movie, despite being messy in parts. It tipped into being overly dark and on the nose, with the flashbacks to Rocket and his animal friends being tested on by the High Evolutionary, but it was certainly a step up from the last few MCU films. Guardians scores 8 for plot and 8 for entertainment value. The ensemble casts are brilliant, if not a bit too large. The movie felt overstuffed at times, especially with Adam Warlock, being a spare and a necessary part. I think without him, the movie would have been more focused and better. Drax and Mantis, played by Dave Baptista and Pom Clementieff, are hilarious, playing off each other incredibly well. Nebula, played by Karen Gillian, is also very funny and a surprisingly emotional but stoic character. Chris Pratt delivers his best performance as Quill, being less of a doofus character and more of the charismatic leader who will do anything to save his friend Rocket. And Rocket, voiced by Bladley Cooper, delivers a strong performance as the emotional heart and centre of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Chukwidi Iwuji as a high evolutionary, although never really being a threat to the Guardians, his performance as a maniacal mad scientist is brilliant. I scored 9 for characters and performances. The visuals were good in most parts, with the Guardian's signature hyperdrive jumps, and a standout scene being when they jumped into the Orgosphere. The action got quite boring after a while, and it dipped its toe into a CGI slugfest, but Gunn's distinctive cinematography quickly brought it back to a decent level. Visuals score 8 out of 10. I've also given the music an 8 out of 10, as the soundtrack was good, but not great, and it did take me out of the film once or twice, and although there were some great song choices, they weren't integrated as well as in the previous 2 Guardians films. When it comes to the ending, it certainly wasn't bad, but I felt a bit disappointed that the Guardians all went their separate ways. Mantis left the group to find herself and go on a gap year, which was completely out of the blue, and I'm disappointed that she and Drax didn't end up together, as this would have been a solid conclusion for both characters. As we saw Drax in Guardians 1 reeling from the loss of his wife and child, and it would have been nice to see him start a new family. From their first interactions in Guardians 2, Mantis and Drax have had a hinted love for each other. This is developed upon in Guardians 3, with Mantis and Drax spending most of the time talking or bickering together, and Mantis sticking up for Drax when Nebula has a go at him. So it's quite a shame that they didn't end up together. I think Gamora and Quill being separated was a good choice, as although Gamora warmed to Quill and the Guardians, it would have felt forced to bring them together. Nebula, I think, has the worst ending out of all the Guardians, as I'm sure that her and Quill would end up together. The pair have developed a bickering but surprisingly tender relationship, which is just left to the side. I understand the choice to have the characters, especially Quill, not needing to be in a relationship to find happiness, but I think the movie could have done with at least 2 of the Guardians being a couple. Perhaps if Rocket found out that Lila was still alive and they ended up together, it would have carried more emotional resonance than all of the Guardians being single at the end. I've scored the ending at 7 out of 10. I've rated Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 at 80%. In summary, it's a good film and the cast are great, but the movie is overstuffed and its ending and lack of stakes let it down. Volume 3 stands at joint 5th place on a film club leaderboard, just under Dune and above Shazam 2, which despite bombing at the box office, I really enjoyed. When looking at recent MCU films I've reviewed for the channel, Guardians tops the list, beating Doctor Strange 2 and Ant-Man Quantumania, but I don't think it does enough to reach the heights of Phase 3 MCU. My rating of 80% is slightly less than the IMDB user rating, which stands at 8.3 out of 10. The Rotten Tomatoes critics have also rated Guardians 3 at 80%, with most critics saying that it does drag on a bit, but delivers an emotionally powerful movie. If you're still here, I want to take 5 minutes to tell you the cinema experience from hell that occurred while watching Guardians 3. I don't think it affected my judgment of the film, but perhaps it put me in a less receptive mood for the movie. So for the next 5 minutes, I will do what has never been done before and complain about teenagers at the cinema. Now over the last few months, I've been going to the cinema on my own for morning or afternoon screenings, and it's perfect. I can choose whatever seat I want, I can go to the toilet without having to shuffle past everyone, and not be distracted by people chatting away or eating their popcorn as loudly as possible. But for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, it was a very different story. I got to my usual seat fairly early, at the top row, right in the middle. People came pouring into the theatre, and it's about halfway full before the adverts start playing. After 5 minutes of ads and trailers, around 80 people are sitting down, mostly couples and a few families. On the top row there's a young couple 5 seats away from me, and it's nice and quiet. And then I see them. A group of disgusting teenage boys come staggering in. About 5 of them. They pass the first few rows, then on to the middle section. And they're still loudly laughing and talking. And a teenager at the back stumbles over a step. What an idiot. The rest of his motley crew laugh at him for his misstep, and they continue to climb the stairs, all the way to the back row. I knew from the second they walked in, my peaceful back row would be ruined. They pass a couple 5 seats away from me, who breathe a sigh of relief, and they see me, a sad lonely man sitting on his own for a morning screening of a superhero film. And they do the unthinkable. Not only do they sit right next to me, even though there's at least 10 empty seats to the left, but they split up, surrounding me in a pincer manoeuvre. I've got 3 to the right of me and 2 to the left. They are talking across me, dropping popcorn on the floor, and the stupid one who tripped on a step is on his phone using TikTok. Is his phone on silent? No, not a chance. This step-tripping moron has his phone on full volume as he scrolls through his TikTok feed. I'm sitting there not saying a word, just simmering with internal anger. In my mind, I've already thrown his phone against the wall, punched him in his face, and the rest of them scatter like flies, while the audience applauds me for getting rid of these swines. But in reality, all I've done is shake my head, ever so slightly. A man a few rows ahead turns around. Will he be the hero to tell them to be quiet? No. Like me, he can't be bothered for a public argument. He just looks at the group, and then looks at me, and also shakes his head. I took this shake as him understanding my situation and giving me sympathy, as I was now hostage to this group of adolescent bastards. The trailers come to an end, and the noisy boys settle down a little, and in that moment, as the screen goes dark, I do the unthinkable. I stand up, take my popcorn which I've 90% finished, and I move. I move to one of the 3 seats on the left. Now perhaps you may be thinking, why was that such a big deal? And to that, the answer is, I'm English. And the unspoken rule of being English is to say and do nothing when something annoys you, and then complain about it afterwards. So I'm keeping up with that custom. But since when is it acceptable to play your phone out loud, completely oblivious to how selfish that is? And to sit right next to someone when there are so many free seats? We were all idiots as teenagers, but this group was something else. Anyway, what were your thoughts on Guardians 3? Is it a perfect conclusion to Gunn's trilogy? Would you like to see the characters brought back in a few years' time? And more importantly, have you had similar experiences at the cinema with annoying teenagers? Let me know in the comments below. If you're new here, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and gently tap in the notification bell. It's early days for Film Club, and this really helps the channel to grow. We cover all the best movies and TV shows, as well as the occasional video essay. The next video will be on why Aquaman 2 will bomb, and then Guardians of the Galaxy 2 versus Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So look out for that one. Thank you, and see you again.